Good evening and welcome to our Wingmen corporate gathering. These gatherings are designed for us as men to network and connect with other men in our community, all while building each other up in our faith. If you're new to Wingmen, then we're glad to have you here. Our mission and our purpose is to bring men together to affirm that our identity is in Christ and to create disciples. We approach this mission in three ways. Our corporate events, which is where we are right now. These events allow for a casting of the net for men to invite other men, co-workers, and business associates to attend. Now, at these events, we'll help cultivate fellowship with other men that is Christ-centered. Whether these events are virtual or live and in person, we love to bring in a guest speaker. The second way we approach our mission is through our element groups. We encourage men to meet in small groups we call elements, which provide a more intimate way for men to develop and build these relationships. Now, these groups are the glue that bind us in unity and cohesion. We believe that when we lock arms and battle alongside each other, it's so much harder to disengage and flee the fight. The third way we approach our mission is through one-on-one discipleship. We encourage men to find another man to disciple and execute the call that Christ commands us in the Great Commission. A great way to keep up with all that's happening with Wingmen is to follow us on social media. Here, we'll keep you up to date with all of our element groups, corporate events, and updates from around the area. If you haven't already, make sure to head over to www.wingmen.org to create your profile and become a Wingman today. Thanks again for joining us for our online corporate gathering. We hope you have a great weekend.
Good evening, one and all. I'm Chad Hennings, president of Wingman Ministries, and I'm excited again for another episode of Wingman Conversations. I'm excited because we have our good friend Kelly Shackelford here with First Liberty. Kelly, you've been a great friend to Wingman, to me as well as to Wingman, and appreciate everything that you've done for us over the many, many years that I guess we've been doing this together. And I'm especially excited for today's conversation in the fact that, just where, not only where our nation is, but I see this as a time of optimism and hope, whereas we've been kind of getting beaten down the last few years. And, what I really want to start this conversation off is several months ago, we had Rod Dreher, author of Live Not by Lies, actually a book you recommended to me to read. And Rob was a phenomenal guest for us and very enlightened a lot of our guys regarding, the potential where we could be. Based on his interviews, for those of you who haven't read Rod's book or seen the episode, Rod went and interviewed Christian dissidents in former communist bloc nations, whether that be in Eastern Europe, Poland, and the Soviet Union, on things, how they had to live through and how they were able to survive and thrive in that environment. And I wanted to kind of get your take, from a macro view, at the 20,000-foot view of just kind of where you see, our culture today, in light of, Rod's book, Live Not by Lies.
Well, I don't think it's that surprising to people when I say the culture's in chaos, somewhat, because when you turn away from God's principles, that's what you get. I think his book is excellent because I think a lot of people can't figure out what's going on. It just looks nutty. A lot of things are going on. They go, that doesn't make any sense. And I think what Rod does is do a good job of pointing out sort of what's happening sort of at a macro level. That in these other communist countries, you got all these people who says what they see happening in the United States is really frightening to them because Marxism it kind of comes in and has to remove the Judeo-Christian worldview because it competes with the worldview of Marxism. And so you see this sort of cultural battle going on, and people being canceled, and people not being able to speak, and all these weird things. And everybody's like, what's the answer? And Live Not by Lies is Solzhenitsyn's last essay he wrote before he was banned from Russia, where he says these totalitarian regimes always exist because people go along with the lies. If enough people speak the truth, it doesn't take a majority, just enough people, it'll collapse the system. And that's what happened in all these countries is believers stood up and they spoke the truth, and they suffered, but it collapsed the system. And so that's the answer for what we're supposed to do in the culture where this is kind of coming at us, is people have to be willing to stand and speak the truth. And it suggests, number one, start with your family. Teach your family truth. Number two, you need to have a cell group a little wider so that you're strengthening one another. Wingmen sounds like a good idea. But I think people, it's a funny story, Chad. My wife, I gave this book to my wife, and I said, you ought to read this. And she read it, and she said, we're going to do a book club online. And I said, Karen, I am really busy. I'm never in town. When I'm in town, the last thing I want to do is have another job at night. She said, we need to do this. I said, yes, ma'am. And we did it. And we did 2 chapters a week for 6 weeks. We started off with, 40 couples, whatever. By the time we were finished, there were 370 couples in this book review. People are hungry for they know that they something's going on. They know they want to be faithful, but they're not sure how to do it. And I think what everybody began to realize is, I can stand for truth in my situation, in my community, in different ways. I'm not supposed to speak up about everything, but if I'm not speaking up about anything, there's a problem.
Yeah.
And I'm encouraged because I'm starting to see people wake up and go, I can speak the truth. I'm not supposed to be silent in the face of things that are clearly wrong. And I'm seeing that begin to change as people get a little more courage. And I think that's the only hope for our country, is enough people who know the truth will speak the truth.
I believe it's Bonhoeffer's quote where he said, to not speak is to speak, and to not act is to act.
Yes.
Wingman is very much we're not a political organization, but sometimes those sectionalities, it does cross over. But when you mention Marxism, people kind of think, that's former Soviet Union, that's Lenin, that's Trotsky. But have you ever read the book Karl Marx and the Devil?
No.
And I just throw that out there because in this book, they talk about the aspect that Marxism is no longer the former bourgeoisie versus the proletariat, that they switched to cultural Marxism, which we found today. And the author of that book documents different court cases, congressional hearings, where the Marxists totally pivoted into things called social justice, thus as well as the sexual revolution.
Yes.
And that's what we're seeing a lot today, where everybody, I'm for social justice, but they bite it into, it's kind of like in Hayek's quote, I forget the actual verbiage, but it's when words lose meaning, people lose liberty.
Amen. Amen.
And they change the definition of that.
And look, I think a lot of what's happening is there's this small minority of people who have beliefs that are antithetical to American values and to Judeo-Christian values. And they're speaking with a very loud voice, and the vast majority are kind of sitting going, what's happening? And I think slowly they're waking up to, wait a second, I know what a man and a woman is, okay? I know what freedom is. I know it's wrong to try to cancel somebody else's right to even express their opinion. This is not America. And people are beginning to speak up, and they're saying, look, I'm not going to accept this because this is wrong. It leads to evil. I mean, if you wonder why in all these countries, when Marxism moves in, why such evil occurs, the first thing, and really this is documented in Rod's book, the first thing they do when they go into Poland or any of these countries, Russia, is they take out the priests, they take out the pastors, they take out the church. If the church doesn't stand and speak the truth, that vacuum is filled. And it's not pretty for anybody what the result is. This is one of the reasons why, all we do at First Liberty is religious freedom. And we tell people all the time, if you're not religious, you still want this. This is really important. Even for those of faith, they think, well, yeah, I want religious freedom because I want the ability for me to live my faith. And they're like, no, you're looking way too small. If you don't have religious freedom, the evil that will occur in your society is unbelievable. And you can look at other societies to see what happens.
You have, several endorsements. I recall one from a gentleman from Czechoslovakia that has supported First Liberty that, to your point, why don't you share that story of what he said?
Just saw him a couple of months ago. It's probably almost 10 years ago now. I can't tell you how much this has repeated itself. Where I speak and somebody from an Eastern European country comes up to me, and this guy's name was Peter. He said, look, I was in Czechoslovakia. I saw this happen. He said, I'm not a religious person. He said, but I think that what you guys are doing is the most important thing anybody's doing in this country. He said, I watched them take down the religious symbols, and within 2 months, we all lost our political freedoms. He said, so he handed me a check for $5,000. So I'm going to be supporting your work from now on. And it wasn't because he was a person of faith at all. He just understood that our founders called this a first freedom, religious freedom, because they understood if you lose religious freedom, you'll lose all your freedom, your political freedom, your economic freedom, your freedom just to even not be in jail or a gulag. You'll lose it all. And so religious freedom is the first freedom. It's the first 2 clauses of the First Amendment. It's what we have to fight first or else. And the reason I explain this to people, they're like, I don't understand why that is. The one thing that a totalitarian regime cannot allow are citizens who hold an allegiance to one higher than the government. So whenever that power structure comes in, that flashpoint is always first going to be religious freedom. And if you lose there, you'll lose it all.
I think that's a great segue to talk to what you and your team at First Liberty are doing. You've been very busy, to say the least, this past year. And I can recall, I think the last time that we had you on was a year ago, kind of pre-pandemic, when we were kind of trying to figure this all out. And you were just saying, hey, there's a tsunami that's going to be coming, not only from the election, as well as the freedoms that churches, or the lack of freedoms that churches are going to be experiencing. So if you can kind of bring us up to date on a few of those cases and what you've been doing.
We knew, it's what I just talked about, we just saw the proof point of that, right? What happens when you give all these mayors and governors who've never had power like this incredible power? What is the first flashpoint that we just all saw during the pandemic it was religious freedom. It was the synagogues, the churches all being closed down when the liquor store was open, the marijuana dispensary was open, and these are some of our cases. The strip club was open, the gambling parlor was open, but the one thing you can't have is a church that's open for an hour on Sunday with lots of social distancing and masks and protections of all sorts. That makes no sense, but it's this first flashpoint we're talking about. And we knew how difficult it was going to be for a judge to rule our way. Number one, there's no precedent on religious freedom during a pandemic, no cases in the history of our country. And if you're a judge, think about this. Somebody comes in and they say, hey, we need you to rule against this guy, this mayor, this governor who says they're saving millions of people's lives. We need you to rule under the Constitution. And yeah, if you get it wrong, everybody's going to say you killed millions of people, but so all the pressure is on the judge to just defer. But the Constitution, says, no, you have certain rights that people can't just take away unless they really have a heavy burden of proof from the government to show that it's totally necessary. And so we were waiting for that right case. We prayed. We had hundreds of churches, synagogues calling us saying, you won't believe what they're doing to us. And finally, right about Easter, we got a call, and it was a church, and they On Fire Christian Church, Louisville, Kentucky. They wanted to have an Easter celebration and be together but be safe. And so somebody came up with the idea of a drive-in service. They thought, we'll drive in our cars. The pastor was up there. He'll speak over a radio frequency into the cars. You don't pass the coronavirus from one automobile to another. We're safe. And you think, okay, that's a great idea. The city of Louisville said, we're going to criminally prosecute you if you hold an Easter service in your cars. And the governor then came out and said, we're going to send police officers to all the churches on Easter Sunday. And any church car that's in the parking lot, we're going to write down your license plate number, and we're going to visit your home, the police are, and you're going to be quarantined for 14 days. And we said, okay, we're now in China. This is the case. And we filed a lawsuit, for an emergency injunction on Good Friday, and got Judge Justin Walker, federal judge, who's now been elevated to the Federal Court of Appeals in D.C., and he issued just a spectacular decision. I mean, you got to realize people at this time, the visuals they were seeing was a guy throwing a baseball with his kids at the park being handcuffed for being in the park. A guy coming off the beach with a surfboard when there's nobody on the beach being arrested for surfing. And people really were asking the question, has the Constitution been suspended during the pandemic? Is there no constitutional protection during the pandemic? And this case said, with a resounding, voice, yes, the Constitution is still in place. He started out by saying, I never thought I would hear about, or maybe even read in some sort of dystopian novel what I am writing now, but an American city has outlawed the celebration of Easter. And he said, this is outrageous, it's unreasonable, and is blatantly unconstitutional. And then he lit into 20 pages of the history of our country, how this country is built on religious freedom, and that this was not going to happen in the United States of America. It was we called it the shot heard around the world #2. The first was the American Revolution. This was the reinstitution of the Constitution, and really significant, first precedent like that in the history of the country. But our goal wasn't to get people in their cars to church. So our next big case was the Tabernacle Baptist Church case. This is a church, we picked a church in a rural area with almost no COVID cases, with a big facility that had plenty of room to do social distancing, and yet they couldn't meet. It was illegal for them to meet, while you could go to the Home Depot, you could have hundreds of people in all these other places, in strip clubs and gambling parlors, all this open. And so we filed a lawsuit, and the good news is, by the time we were finished with this, not only have we won an injunction on behalf of this church, but the Attorney General of the state, a great guy by the name of Daniel Cameron, joined us in suing his own governor. And we ended up with a statewide injunction opening every church, saying you have a right to open and safely do your church service, just like every other entity in the state. So those are really important victories. And everybody's probably watched all these cases going to the Supreme Court, churches being closed. Before Amy Coney Barrett, the churches were losing. Since Amy Coney Barrett got on the court, the churches are now winning, I think 10 in a row. But what people don't understand is those aren't merits cases. Those are emergency motions, so they're not precedential. So we literally are still in a battle over whether the government controls our churches and our synagogues. And we've got to keep fighting until we get that big case to the Supreme Court and they make clear the constitutional system we have. So we're still in the middle of this battle, although we've won all of our cases so far. We really need a precedent that applies across the country that stops this kind of thing. Because look, if all you got to do is say, I'm a mayor and there's an emergency, I'm shutting down your church, your synagogue, that's not the way things work in this country. These are fundamental rights. The fundamental right to freedom of assembly, to freedom of speech, to free exercise of religion. These are what our country is built upon, and no government official has the right to strip that away from people.
We talked about some of the groundwork, the things to be optimistic about. You guys have been laying the groundwork for the last 5 years. You talk about Justice Coney Barrett and other justices. Talk about that, why we should feel optimistic about our future going forward.
Yeah, I've been doing religious liberty law for 32 years, and my whole career, there's 2 religion clauses. There's a major case under both religion clauses that have caused just tremendous damage to religious liberty for 50 years. And if you'd have asked me 5 years ago, can you get rid of those? I'd have said, not in my lifetime. I can chip away at them. I think one of them was cited 50,000 times. And in the last, 3 years, I've watched all that change. We're in the process of imploding both of those really bad cases and really restoring religious liberty in a way that no American alive has seen. What am I talking about? Well, under the Free Exercise Clause, there's a case called Smith that really neuters the Free Exercise Clause. And so people in my work typically don't bring free exercise claims. They bring free speech claims, and they say it's religious speech, which is really sad. I mean, the founders put free exercise because this was like one of our most fundamental rights. So we had a case, the Coach Kennedy case. I think a lot of the wingmen know about Coach Kennedy, the coach who lost his job because he went to a knee after the game by himself to say a prayer, thanking God for the privilege of coaching the young men he got to coach. And of course, he was a Marine. So when they told him, if you go to a knee again, you're going to get fired, he's like, what did I go for 20 years and represent my country about? And what kind of example am I going to set for my kids if I run as soon as the government says, no prayer for you, buddy? So God bless Coach Kennedy, but he stood his ground. He was fired. And unfortunately for Coach Kennedy, he lives in the Ninth Circuit, which is a very liberal circuit. And they said coaches are not allowed to pray in public if anyone can see them, which is not the law, but it's what they want the law to be. We went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, we're not going to take the case yet. There's some facts we want developed. But, to do that, come back. 4 of the conservative justices, Amy Coney Barrett's not on the court yet, so she'd probably add to this, wrote a concurrence. They said, by the way, we notice the first claim to reach us was a free speech claim, not a free exercise claim. Maybe that's because of that Smith decision that has caused so much damage to religious freedom over the last 30 years. But we haven't been asked to review that decision yet. Not very subtle. So everybody who's in this arena knows and believes that we're on the verge of restoring the free exercise of religion across America. And it's just, there's a lot of cases going up, but that was a very strong message. Same on the Establishment Clause. Establishment Clause says Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion. What did that mean? The founders didn't want there to be an established national church, which then took away from everybody else's freedoms. But 50 years ago, we had a liberal, the Warren Court, decide to, no, it means more than that. It means separation of church and state. It means offended observers can bring lawsuits. You can't bring a lawsuit because you're offended. The only exception to that in America has been if you're offended by religion. And so our whole lives we've seen attacks against nativity scenes, menorahs, Ten Commandments monuments. Why? Because the founders would have had any problem with those things? No, because of this Lemon case. It's called Lemon from 50 years ago. So we get the Bladensburg cross case, which is a cross that was put up 100 years ago to remember those who had died in World War I. And the American humanists bring a lawsuit, say you can't have this memorial, this veterans memorial on government property because it's a cross. And the courts of appeals, one of the judges said, why don't we just cut the arms off the cross? That way nobody will be offended. We don't have to tear it down. And we were like, okay, I think we're in trouble before this court. And sure enough, 2-1 decision, unconstitutional after almost 100 years. So when we went to the Supreme Court, we're now looking at, Justice Kavanaugh, Justice Gorsuch, new justices. I knew these are really pro-religious liberty people. And I thought if we can just get the chief, we might have a chance to get rid of this Lemon case that's been in existence and caused all this hostility to religion by the government for so many years. So we won that case 7-2, but more importantly, 5-4, they said we're not following Lemon anymore. That is a sea change. I mean, for 50 years we've gone in this hostility to religion. We just turned. And we're seeing all the lower court decisions now. Everything began to change. Prayer in public, that's not a problem. These are things that have been done since the founding of our country. Monuments, memorials that come under attack, they're presumptively held constitutional. Our culture is changing because we're going back to those founding principles of religious freedom. So I really believe what I'm about to say. In my opinion, in the next 5, 10, 20 years, every American is about to have more religious freedom than they've ever had. Whether that's because God wants there to be a revival or whether that's because it's going to get so hostile we're going to need it, I don't know. But I know it's happening. And the only thing that can thwart that I see is this really radical attempt that's being attempted right now, which is called court packing, which is when you add justices to the Supreme Court to try to change the results of the opinions. It's a horrible idea. It's been done in other countries. It leads to almost immediate tyranny. because what you're doing is you're taking the courts and you're putting them under the political branch, and you no longer have constitutional rights. You have whatever right the majority party wishes you to have, because they can just add justices to take away your right. Hugo Chavez did this in 2004. Quickly, Venezuela just fell off. Argentina's done it. They tried it in the United States in 1936 and 37. FDR did. The American people just reacted with a fury, said, this is tyranny. We will not allow this in our country. And so it's a huge issue. And again, people might think, well, surely they're not going to do this. Well, there's hundreds of millions of dollars committed that groups that this is their number one goal. The president has issued an executive order establishing a commission to reform the United States Supreme Court. And within days of that, a bill was filed in the House to add 4 justices to the United States Supreme Court to reverse, all the conservative justices and judges that are on the court. So this is pure court packing. It is clear that's the attempt. And again, we did polling on this. We released it, Chad, just recently. The Wall Street Journal released it. 2/3 of the country against this before they even understand it fully. 2-to-1 independents against it. And people say, oh, well, so we don't have to worry about this. 63% of Democrats are in favor of it. Democrats hold the House, the Senate, the presidency. So this is a real danger. It would not only destroy religious freedom, I think it would destroy our courts. It would destroy whatever right you care about. And so it's one of those things that people really do need to educate their neighbors, their friends, because I don't care who you are, what you believe, you're really against this if you understand it. And we've got to make sure it doesn't happen, because our Supreme Court is one of the envies of the world. And to allow it to be really destroyed like this, it would be a horrific mistake. And I don't think our country would recover. Other countries haven't recovered. And so it's something we have to focus on. So my summary is, I am so optimistic long term, as long as we can take care of the short term. Yeah. And I feel like we will, but it's going to take all of us really doing our part to make sure that happens.
One of our mantras at Wingman is encouraging men to get off the bench and get into the game, get
Amen.
active, not just be spectators. And I know a lot of guys are probably thinking right now, what can I do? Mm-hmm. As an individual, how can I support First Liberty? But, I'm curious, what resources do you have, educational, whatnot, that guys can go, mention your website,
Yep.
can go engage with you where they can educate themselves, their families, their neighbors, their friends, and what would you encourage a guy who's listening today to do?
It's kind of funny. We're kind of swinging back to the very beginning.
Yeah.
Standing up and speaking the truth, right? Well, how do you do that with what I'm talking about? I got 2 suggestions. Number one, go to firstliberty.org, which is our main website, and there's a way to. You go scroll down just a little. It says "Be an Insider," and when you do, you'll get an email every week. And there's like 4 stories of cases, things that are happening, whatever, in our Insider Alert. And maybe one of those really speaks to you and your people that you talk to. Take that, educate them, send it to people. It's really simple, because most people have no idea what's going on. So that's something you can do just on religious liberty all the time. Become educated. What happens is, if people don't know they have freedoms, then they're scared. They're not sure if they can do that, say that. It really hinders the gospel. If people instead realize, hey, I'm in America, I can do that. Yeah, my kid can have religion in their assignment. Yeah, you could go, there's an endless list of these things. So number one, I'd say get on that insider list so you're getting the info. On the court packing, go to, and you can find this at the firstliberty.org website also, but go to supremecoup, COUP.com. It is our deal on the court packing. One of the first things you see is take action. And you click on that, and it says, here are some ways you can take action. One of the things is, it's got a bunch of memes. Some of them are really funny that you can just put up on your social media to point out how bad court packing is. For instance, Biden, when he was a senator, said, court packing is a boneheaded idea. Well, now he's doing a commission to look at possibly court packing. So just some of those kind of things. You can have fun with them, but I think there's a tremendous amount of education there. If you want to go deep, there's a scholarly paper, there's a 3-minute video, There's memes you can use, but you can. I just encourage people, in your case, be the Paul Revere's. All the wingmen, they can be the Paul Revere's, right? Somebody's coming to take away freedom. My job as a man is to stand up and say, not unless you come through me. I'm going to stand up. I'm going to speak the truth. I'm going to make sure my kids and my grandkids inherit the same incredible country that was given to me. I'm going to pass it down. But that means I've got some work to do. And so easy to do that. Most people don't even realize this is going on, that there's a commission meeting right now that's going to come out with recommendations in 5 months on reforming our Supreme Court. It's fascinating how they're adding 4 justices. How many justices are there right now? There's 9. There's been 9 for over 150 years. Thomas Edison was coming up with the light bulb. Orville and Wilbur Wright were developing flight. This is how long we've had 9 justices. So why are they adding 4? Well, there's 6 conservatives and 3 liberals. If you add 4 justices, you now have 7 liberals, 6 conservatives. So it's not a mystery as to what they're trying to do. But what people don't understand is this is not just a political thing. This is a thing that destroys the court, the independence of the judiciary, and leads to horrible things that have happened in other countries. We've got to make sure this doesn't happen here. And if we do, I think the way religious freedom is going is so positive. It's going to provide really protection for everybody in Wingman to go out and do stuff with regard to the gospel that maybe they've never done before.
That's great. So you guys have your marching orders. Get off the bench, get in the game. Go to firstliberty.org. Kelly, thank you so much. I appreciate your friendship and everything that you've done for us. And man, keep on keeping on. We'll keep you in our prayers and continue to support you however we can. So thank you very much.
Thank you.